What is up, Sopranos fans? This is Pure Kino, and this is the start of a new series of videos I'm planning on doing. I want to review each episode of The Sopranos individually, and I plan on doing it more, off-the-cuff vlog style. And the reason for that is because my usual videos are highly scripted and analytical, and they usually take a long time to make, between 2 weeks to a month, depending on the video. And I just want to get you guys a lot more content, especially Sopranos content, given the news that the movie has been delayed again until September of this year. I want to get you guys as much Sopranos content as I can to tide you over while we all wait. And I thought this was a great way to just make a lot more content quickly. So yeah, let's jump into it. Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. The first episode that got us started on this Sopranos journey. The episode, revolves around Tony going to therapy for the first time. We're introduced to Melfi, and, through Tony's narration, we're introduced to, all the characters on the show. Tony suffered a panic attack before the episode takes place. The doctors were not able to figure out a reason why, so they sent him to a therapist to try to see if maybe it's like a psychological reason. We get to explore his character and his life, the things that are bringing him stress. He's got a wife and kids who kind of bust his balls a little bit. He's got an uncle who, interferes with his friends and is planning on killing some guy in his friend's restaurant. So there's just a lot of things in his life that are bringing him stress. One of the few things that, he really enjoys, besides, sleeping with women and, all the mob stuff that he does, is his love of animals. He has these ducks that have flown into his pool. He's feeding them, caring for them, and eventually they fly away, which triggers the panic attack that we see in the first episode. So we really get a great sense into who this character is. He is a mob guy. Earlier he's beating someone up who owes him money, but he's also got this really sensitive side to him. He loves animals, he loves his family, and he has these really complicated feelings about being in the mafia. This episode is very different than the rest of the series. It was filmed about 1 year before the rest of the series got made. It was a test pilot to see if HBO was even interested in it. If they weren't, David Chase was planning on filming another 45 minutes and just releasing it as a movie. And we all know that, he loves movies and he loves that standalone style of storytelling. And we could definitely see that in this episode. The whole episode has kind of a Goodfellas vibe to it with the, the narration. Tony's, explaining his life and what's going on with him. And I could definitely see Goodfellas as one of the primary influences. That and Scorsese really had an impact on what David Chase was trying to do. Some things are very different in this episode because of that than the rest of the series. The most important thing is Tony is the boss in this episode. He's referred to as the boss of North Jersey by his uncle. And that is not how it is throughout the rest of the season. Tony's a capo when the series starts, and he works his way up to being boss at the end of season 1. There's no mention of Jackie Aprile in this episode, and there's a lot of other little details here and there that get kind of established further. The fact that Silvio doesn't know who Arthur is kind of doesn't make sense since they all grew up together, but they kind of establish those details more in the next episode. Which is not unusual. Many shows kind of take a few episodes or even a whole season to get started. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia was kind of the same way. The first season was kind of a mess, and then they figured things out moving forward. There's also some differences with James Gandolfini. He gained weight and started taking voice lessons after this episode was made, and he came up with the iconic Tony Soprano accent that we all know and love. So he looks a little bit different, looks very healthy in this episode compared to the rest of the series, and his voice is a little bit more normal. He doesn't have that thick New Jersey accent. There's also a difference in tone in this episode compared to the rest of the series. It borders almost on corniness at times. There's a scene where he sees a guy who owes him money, and he runs him over in a parking lot full of people. It's a little bit ridiculous. I know, they skirt the law throughout the series, and at times you're like that they would totally get caught for that, but this one in particular really stood out to me. There's a crowd of people watching him kick the shit out of this guy. The license plate's in full view. There's just no way they would have gotten away with this, and it's one of the things that makes it hard for me to show people this series. Obviously, when you introduce them to The Sopranos, you have to start with the first episode. But there's some tone issues here that kind of make it hard. I had to tell people, like, no, this isn't how the rest of the series is. It gets really good after this, but you just kind of have to get through the pilot. There's a lot of great things about the pilot. I think it's really funny, and I'll talk about some of the scenes that I thought were really funny. But yeah, there's some tone issues there that I don't think are present throughout the rest of the series. There's some things that get established here, though, that would be referenced later on in the series. This is the first time we hear mention of varsity athlete, Uncle Junior, putting Tony down. And that would become the most iconic meme line throughout the series, is the varsity athlete bit, which is great to see it here. Gary Cooper is mentioned, and of course, that's Tony's kind of masculine idol. He references that here, and he brings it up again in the Christopher Columbus episode. And then Carmela says to Tony that he's going to go to hell when he dies, when he's going in for his MRI. And of course, Tony would bring that up again in their Whitecaps fight episode, which is one of the best scenes in the entire series. So we do get some things established here that will be important later on in the series. Some things that I noticed are this is one of the only 2 episodes that creator David Chase directed himself. He directed the first episode and he directed the last episode, Made in America. So it's kind of cool that he gets to bookend the series with his personal touch there. Another thing I noticed was the opening shot shows Tony. We see him in between the legs of a statue of a woman. I think they use this shot again later on in another therapy scene, but it stands out to me as very maternal. It's almost like this woman is giving birth to Tony, and given the fact that a lot of the first season revolves around the conflict with his mother, and that's kind of why he's in therapy, I definitely think that was intentional, that maternal aspect and that symbolism. Speaking of funny scenes, there's a really funny scene when Tony goes to the restaurant in New York. He goes twice. He goes once with Irina, who's played by a different actress than the normal actress throughout the rest of the series. But he goes back again later on with his wife, and the maitre d' there, says to Tony, "Hey, we haven't seen you in forever. Where you been?" Which is really funny given the fact that he was just there with his mistress, but you can tell that the staff is experienced and they know, don't bring up the girlfriend when the wife is here. So props to those guys. And then another scene that really stood out to me was Junior driving Livia in the car. He's complaining about Tony and complaining about the fact that he, should be the boss of the family. And there's great symbolism here because he's driving like an old man. He's driving slow, hunched over, squinting through his, very large glasses. And there's traffic piling up behind him. I think one of the cars even passes him. It's great symbolism for the fact that, despite what he thinks, he's gotten old and life has kind of passed him by. He's not as relevant. He's slowing things down. So it's great foreshadowing to the conflict that would be between Tony and Junior, and the reason why Junior ultimately does not win that fight. So yeah, that was the first episode of The Sopranos. Very good episode. I love it a lot. And yeah, I hope you guys like this new review style. I plan on doing a lot of these episodes released pretty frequently. So stay tuned for the next episode review coming soon. Thanks. What is up, Sopranos fans? This is Pure Kino, and this is another Sopranos vlog. I'm not sure if vlog is the right word for what this is, but I'm just going to keep using it for now. And yeah, we're going to be reviewing another episode today. This time, Season 1, Episode 2, 46 long. Like I mentioned in my last review, this episode was filmed almost a full year after the pilot was shot. In between that time, they had worked on developing the story, and they had more of an idea of what the show was going to be about. They introduced some things here that would get established throughout the rest of the series and weren't present in the pilot. This is the first time we're introduced to Jackie Aprile as the acting boss of the family. I think they realized it would be a good idea for Tony to not immediately be the boss, but that's something he would be working towards throughout this season, and that gives a lot of great conflict between him and Junior. This is the first time we're introduced to Brendan Falone, Christopher's drug-addicted and reckless friend. He gets into a little bit of trouble in this episode. We're also introduced to Georgie for the first time, the barman at the Bada Bing, who's not that bright and kind of gets on Tony's nerves. Tony would abuse Georgie throughout the series, so it's really funny to see him, struggling in this episode with the phones, and then Tony gets pissed at him and starts the trend of beating him. And lastly, we're introduced to Mikey Palmise, Junior's right-hand man in the first season. He and Tony just really do not like each other, but they have to act nice, at least on the surface level, because they're supposed to be at peace between each other. But we obviously know that that's not going to last forever because these two despise each other. 46 long. There's basically two plots going on in this episode. The first plot is with Christopher and Brendan. They've robbed a truck that belongs to Junior. Tony has to basically have a sit down with Jackie and Junior to kind of work out a deal. Christopher and Brendan are basically forced to pay restitution, which they are not happy about. They're tired of getting treated badly, not respected. So they decide, they're not going to listen to the rules. They're going to rob another truck that belongs to Junior. Eventually, Christopher realizes that this is not a smart move. He needs to kind of be loyal to Tony and do what he says. So he backs out. Brendan does the job anyway, and something goes wrong, and the driver of the truck ends up being killed. Tony eventually, mediates it. They have to return the truck and the things they stole, and Tony and his crew get a little taste of it too. That's a trend that would be established in a lot of episodes. Even when they do something wrong, there's always a little bit of skimming off the top for themselves, even when they have to pay restitution, which is pretty funny. The main plot of this episode, though, revolves around Livia. She's living by herself. Tony's worried about her. He wants to put her in a retirement community, not a retirement home, as he continues to emphasize. But Livia doesn't want to. She is a hassle. She's very negative, and it's just making his life very hard. Eventually, she almost burns her house down. Tony brings in like a maid to kind of help out around the house, but Livia drives the maid away with her probably racism. That's probably what it was, but basically just by being a horrible person. And eventually she runs over a friend of hers while driving because she's getting too old to drive now. And finally Tony, pulls the plug and is like, okay, we're putting you in a retirement community. And she's pissed about this. And Tony has a lot of negative feelings because of his mother, but he's not able to really express it. He has this idea that he needs to be a good son and treat his mother well, even though she's a horrible person. And that disconnect there, not being able to realize that he kind of hates his mom, forces him to displace his anger on other people. And at the end of the episode, he beats up Georgie because Georgie's messing up with the phone. It reminds him of his mother. And that is a classic Tony Soprano move. Something pisses him off. He's not able to express it properly, and he takes it out on someone else. Kicks the dog, metaphorically. That is the plot of this episode. Really good introduction to Tony's character and his psychological problems. This was also the first episode to ever... It's the first and only episode to ever open with a cold open. So before the title sequence, there's a scene where they're counting money, and they see this new show where they're interviewing a mobster who's turned, author turned witness, and they're talking about the downfall of the mafia and why things are going down. It's kind of ironic because they're counting money as they do this, so we can see that the mob is still operating, they're still making money, but things definitely are trending downhill. That's a theme throughout The Sopranos. Tony says it in the first episode that he came in at the end. The best times are already past, and yeah, this is a great kind of introduction to that. It's the only time they've ever done a cold open, which is pretty interesting. Every other time, it's always the title sequence is the very first thing, and then they jump into the episode. So I do think that theme of things on a decline is very important to the show. And the last thing I just noticed here was that Tony is a lot nicer to Carmela in this episode than throughout the rest of the series. There's a scene when Livia starts the fire. He calls Carmela to go over there and check on his mom, and he apologizes because he knows that she's busy, and he asked her to go over there anyway. That line stood out to me a lot. Tony in later seasons would never, be considerate of someone else's time, would never apologize and thank them like that. There's also a scene later on when he offers to make lunch for the two of them, and Tony later on would never offer to do any cooking, unless it was like a barbecue or something where he's kind of showing off. But it just goes to show you how much stress being boss and the mafia lifestyle has added to his life. He's just so much nicer before he has to start dealing with all of that. It's almost crazy to compare season 1 Tony to season 6. It's just night and day difference. So yeah, that is 46 long. Great episode, and I can't wait to review another one coming up soon. Thanks. What is up, Sopranos fans? I'm back with another Sopranos vlog here, and today we're going to be looking at the third episode, Denial, Anger, Acceptance. Now there's 4 beats that are going on in this episode. The first one revolves around a conflict that Tony gets involved in between these Hasidic Jews. This guy Shlomo, he owns some motels, and his son-in-law won't grant his daughter a divorce unless Shlomo gives him a piece of the hotels. Tony agrees to basically force the son-in-law to give up his claim in exchange for a piece of the hotels. They take him, they beat him, but no matter what they do to him, he will not give in. This guy is tough. Eventually, Tony has to go down there himself, and there's a great scene between the two of them where the son-in-law, is talking about these Jews who held out against the Roman army, and he says, where are the Romans now? And Tony has this great line where he says, "You're looking at him, asshole," which is true. I mean, the Italians are descendants of the Romans. So yeah, just a great line. Eventually, they do get him to give in by threatening to basically cut off his willy. And the Shlomo tries to back out of the deal, but Tony basically threatens to beat him up too. Shlomo calls him a golem. He calls him an inhuman monster, which kind of messes with Tony a little bit because he's dealing with some stuff related to the next beat, which is the fact that Jackie Aprile is dying of cancer. Jackie is Tony's childhood friend, and he's the acting boss of the family. And at the beginning of the episode, it looks like he might be doing all right. Tony even gets him a stripper, basically disguised as a nurse, to help take his mind off the cancer. But at the end of the episode, we see that Jackie is really dying. He looks really sick, and yeah, he's not going to make it, which really messes with Tony. Tony starts questioning everything. If a man like Jackie, who he looks up to, can just wither away like this, it makes him, question what's the purpose of life. And he goes through, obviously, the stages of death, which are listed in the title: denial, anger, and then finally acceptance. Now, the third beat revolves around Artie and his wife, Charmaine. They have lost their restaurant. Tony burnt it down. He did it to save Artie because Junior was going to do the hit in the restaurant. But still, it's put Artie out of work. And the insurance money is tied up because they think it might be arson. So Carmela offers to have them cater her charity event. And though she acts like she's Charmaine's friend, she does this hand gesture, which treats Charmaine like a servant. Yeah, it kind of shows Carmela's attitude. She thinks she's better than people because of all the money that Tony brings in. But Charmaine has this great scene where she kind of puts Carmela in her place. She tells Carmela that when they were younger, she and Tony slept together, and hints that basically, if she wanted that life, she could have absolutely married Tony, but she chose not to. She wanted to earn an honest living, and in that way, it makes her better than Carmela, no matter what their money situation is. It's just a great scene to see Carmela just show so shocked by that. Really great. And the last beat revolves around Brendan and Christopher. Meadow and her friend Hunter, who, by the way, is played by David Chase's daughter, if you didn't know that. The two of them go to Christopher because they're trying to get crystal meth because they wanted to study for their SATs. Christopher initially refuses, but he eventually agrees because he doesn't want them to go to real drug dealers. Eventually, Christopher is kidnapped, and they take him, and they're about to execute him. He thinks it's because he gave the drugs to Meadow, but in actuality, it's Junior. Junior wants to send a message that you can't mess with him. He's tired of Tony getting all the credit for solving the problem that he created. And yeah, he decides to send a message by, one, doing a mock execution on Christopher. And then at the end of the episode, he actually does kill Brendan. There's a great scene between him and Livia that kind of shows that Livia is the real power behind him. She is a very formidable presence, and she's kind of the one secretly giving the orders. But yeah, they decide to kill Brendan. They can't kill Christopher because he's too important to the family. But they kill Brendan to send a message. And yeah, that's going to be the start of some conflict between Junior and Tony moving forward. So yeah, that's pretty much the episode. Kind of more of a setup episode to things that are going to come. But it is great that we got to see Jackie. We really didn't get to see him that much throughout the series. He's only in these couple of episodes before he passes away. And it was really interesting to see him, or it would have been interesting to see him at the height of his power, because he seems like a really respected guy, a really good leader, and things start to go downhill after he dies. So it's sad we didn't get to see him too much, but at least we got a little bit of a hint as to who he was in this episode. So yeah, that is Denial, Anger, Acceptance. Thank you guys so much for watching this, and stay tuned for the next review coming soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? This is Pure Kino, and I'm back with another Sopranos vlog. Today we're going to be looking at the 4th episode, Meadowlands. And this episode starts with Tony kind of becoming paranoid about being caught going to therapy. He's a high-profile mobster. He's worried that if people find out he's going to therapy, one, they're going to think he looks weak, but two, they're going to start to wonder if he's revealing confidential secrets to this therapist. And it could lead to his death. And he's not really sure if he can trust Melfi. He wonders if she might reveal information. So he has this corrupt police detective who works for him, Vin Mackenzian, start to follow her. Now, Vin is drunk. He's kind of a degenerate, and he thinks that Melfi is Tony's girlfriend. And when he sees Melfi going on a date, he pulls them over and just starts beating the shit out of her date, thinking it's for Tony, but Tony obviously did not want her messed with. But another thing going on in this episode is the conflict between Tony and Junior. You'll remember the last episode, Junior had Brendan executed to send a message to Tony that he means business. Christopher's really mad about this. He wants to go after Junior, but Tony does not want a war. And he settles on just beating up Mikey Palmise, taking a stapler, which is not the most brutal thing in the series, but it was just, that was kind of a painful attack. He starts stapling this ticket to his shirt, which, I mean, you can already see just why they hate each other so much. Like, this was just boiling over at this point. But things take an even worse turn when Jackie Aprile passes away. Now the New Jersey family is without leadership, and it becomes clear that Tony and Junior are going to fight for the title of boss. It has to be one of them. Junior does not want to back down, but Tony actually gets the idea from Melfi to let Junior have the illusion of control. So Tony agrees to let Junior become the boss, even though he's the one who's going to be making all the real decisions. He's the real power. Junior's just a figurehead, and he's there to take the hit when the FBI come down on the family. They want the leader. Junior's the one who's going to pay that price. And it's funny, Tony actually convinces Junior to give him one of his unions in exchange for the title of boss. So in fact, Junior is actually paying for this, which is pretty funny. It shows you just how smart Tony is and how great a strategist he is. So Tony decides to stay in therapy as a result of that. He gets a lot of good ideas from Melfi, which would become a theme. A lot of the things he discusses in therapy end up inadvertently helping him become a worse person by being a better mobster, which is pretty funny. And the last little subplot in this episode is the fact that AJ gets into a fight at school with this bigger kid. They go after school to finish the fight, but Tony had run into the kid's father earlier in the episode. And even though he was acting nice, the father was really intimidated because Tony has this really tough reputation as a mobster. And he basically told the kid that he's not allowed to fight AJ. And AJ's confused about this. He doesn't really understand that his family is connected to the mafia until Meadow straightens him out and shows him a website that confirms that, yeah, that his family is connected to some bad stuff. And as the episode ends at Jackie's funeral, we see AJ start to realize, just what his family is a part of. And he's kind of losing his innocence a little bit. He's discovering the truth about them, which is really interesting to see. I guess one last thing to note would be that this is the first time we're introduced to the capos of the New Jersey family. We got Larry Boy Baris, Jimmy Altieri, and Ray Curto. Now these guys, despite the fact that they're the leadership of the family, they start to play less and less of a part as the series goes on. It's mostly in the first season that they're involved, and then after that, Tony's associates kind of taking over more, like Paulie and Christopher and Silvio. But yeah, it was interesting to see them, and then we'll get to learn a little bit more about them moving forward too. So yeah, that is Meadowlands. A great setup to the conflict that we know is brewing on the horizon between Tony and Junior. Can't wait to review more episodes. Coming soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? Pure Kino here, and I'm back with another Sopranos vlog, or Sopranolog, as one of my awesome fans suggested to me. But today we're going to be looking at another episode, Season 1, Episode 5, College, which some of you will know I already did a whole video on why the episode was so important to television history. I'm going to link that in the description if you haven't, check it out. But in this one, I'm going to go over a lot of the details that I didn't get to focus on that first time around. So to give a quick recap, the episode is about Tony taking Meadow on a trip to visit some colleges in Maine she's thinking of attending. While he's there, he sees a former member of his crime family who turned informant and ratted on the family, and he decides he has to kill this guy. But he has Meadow with him, and he can't kill the guy right with Meadow with him. He has to kind of hide it from her, which is complicated because he's being honest with her for once about the mafia and himself, and they're really connecting for once. So that's putting a strain on their relationship too, that he has to do this murder underneath her nose. Meanwhile, Carmela is at home sick, and she gets a visit from Father Phil. They end up bonding, they really connect, they start drinking, things start to get a little intimate, but before they can, he gets sick, he's really drunk, and the night ends pretty awkwardly between the two of them. So one thing I really didn't get to focus on last time was the Father Phil Carmela stuff, which I do think is pretty important. Father Phil, he is a spiritual mentor and a friend to Carmela. They hang out together, they watch movies, they eat dinner by themselves a lot because Tony is usually away, doing whatever he does. And Father Phil, he's kind of a creepy guy a little bit. He's kind of a snaky, in the wings kind of guy, the kind that kind of hangs around the girlfriend or the wife while the husband's away, and kind of gets in through that method by being a friend and, a shoulder to cry on. And it's also complicated because he's in a position of power over her a little bit. He's a religious figure, and he uses that power both to be around Carmela because he's a little bit attracted to her, but also he's not really interested so much in being with her or anything like that. But he does like using her to get things. So food, he loves her food, and he likes using Tony's house and TV and DVD player and stuff like that. It's a very manipulative relationship, and it's interesting to see it kind of blow up here a little bit. Now, Carmela, she is very religious, but she's religious usually to make herself feel better about herself. She uses religion as a way to feel superior to people, just like with the money and the mafia, all the benefits that the mafia lifestyle affords her. She uses that to feel superior to people. She does the same thing with religion. And there's actually a great little line she has when she's talking to Father Phil about the things about Christianity that confuse her. She talks about the fact that Jesus said, "The sun shines on the just and the unjust alike." And that part really confuses her, and she doesn't like it. Specifically, she points out she doesn't like the idea of whores going to heaven before she will. Now, of course, when she says whores, she's obviously thinking about Tony's mistresses. the women he sleeps with really get under her skin, and she wants to feel superior to them because she's, this morally virtuous woman and she has all this money and this great life. But she doesn't really get the idea that Christ was saying about, being humble, not judging other people, embracing them, loving them. She wants to use her religion as a way to just elevate herself, which is very in line with her character. Now, she does have one moment of real honesty in this episode, which is when she starts breaking down and crying and confessing to Father Phil about what she's allowed to happen under her house. She's accepted Tony's immoral ways because she wanted the money and she wanted all the benefits. But it's actually a real moment of honesty when she does that confession. It's one of the very few times she's really honest. The only other time I can remember her being honest about that is when Christopher is shot in the third season, or the second season, I mean, sorry. She is praying to God for his health, and she admits that, she knows her family is into some evil stuff, and she prays that God will be merciful anyway. So it's one of the few times she is really honest. And I guess one last little detail to point out was that I found the scene with Father Phil, chugging the communion wine, really funny. Carmela even looks up and she's like, what the fuck is he doing? And he gets really, pissed drunk, and that ends in a very awkward encounter. But just a funny, ridiculous situation that they find themselves in. Now, a couple of the details from this episode I didn't get a chance to mention in the other video was the car chase scene. So I found the scene to be really unrealistic. So he's driving crazy, he's swerving, going into the other lane, and Meadow is freaking out. She's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Tony is saying, I'm just fooling around, just relax. And he keeps doing all this crazy stuff. And then finally, they pull into the motel, and then Meadow's just like, oh, that was weird. She just kind of accepts it. No. If that was in real life, she would be like, what the hell was that? That was weird. Yeah, so that one part was kind of unrealistic and a little ridiculous for me. But another little detail I noticed was Tony calls Irina before he calls Carmela. When he's in the phone booth, he's saying how's my sweetie doing? And we're led to believe it's Carmela he's talking to, but it cuts to Irina. So it's really funny that he called his mistress before his wife, which is a very Tony thing to do. And she mentions a line that would become a title of an episode, the knight in white satin armor. That would become the title of an episode later. And I think that imagery is really evocative of the Sopranos. A knight is this masculine warrior, but white satin armor is weak and feminine. And that disconnect there is kind of Tony in a nutshell. He, on the one hand, is this badass mafia guy, but on the other hand, he can't stop feeling weak and like a loser, and that's why he's in therapy. So I think that is definitely a metaphor for the entire series. Another little detail was that Carmela calls Tony at the motel to see if he's actually there or not, or if he's, with another woman or something like that. She would do that again in season 2 after Janice kills Richie and he has to go over there. He calls his mother's house to see if Tony is actually there. So that would be a move she would do a lot. So that was the little details I missed last time around. I know this is a kind of a different review because I already did a normal review on this episode. But yeah, great episode, really important to television history. And stay tuned for the next Sopranolog coming soon. Thanks. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here, and I'm back with another Sopranolog. This time we're looking at the 6th episode of the first season, Pax Soprana, which is a reference to the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which is kind of referenced in this episode. So there's two main beats going on in this episode. The first is with Tony and Melfi. Tony is having a problem. He has not been able to get an erection, not with Irina, his mistress, or with Carmela. He blames it on the Prozac, but Melfi thinks that it might be another reason. It might be because of his depression. It leads to Carmela getting angry at Tony. She, in the last episode, learned that his psychiatrist was a woman, and because of that, she now feels that Tony is no longer interested in her. she's actually jealous of Melfi. Unlike the mistresses, she speaks with Father Phil and kind of admits that the mistresses weren't that much of a problem for her. She felt she was better than them. She thought that, it was just physical with them. But for once, she feels that Tony is connecting emotionally with another woman, Melfi, his therapist. And she's kind of right, because Tony is starting to be attracted to Melfi. He thinks he's falling in love with her. He's bringing her coffee. They're flirting a little bit. Tony starts to have dreams about Melfi, despite the fact that he can't get, aroused with other women. He is aroused when he thinks about Melfi. He even asks his mistress, Irina, to dress in business clothes like Melfi dresses in, because that's what excites him right now. And he confesses this to Melfi. He kisses her. She obviously, is his doctor, so she's not interested in him that way. He steals her car. She's having car problems, and he steals the car and fixes it for her as a gesture of love, which she is obviously upset by, because that's invading her privacy. It's messing up their relationship as doctor and patient. Eventually, Tony and Carmela kind of bond at the end of the episode. She admits that, she is jealous of Melfi's ability to help Tony. And Tony tells her that, no matter what, she is the most important thing in his life, which is a little bit of a lie in the sense that Tony was saying, there's nothing there between me and Melfi. But obviously he was, feeling in love with her, partially because Melfi is a caring figure for him. As a therapist, she listens, she doesn't judge him, and he kind of sees this, as love, when in reality he's just really grateful for the progress that she's helped him achieve so far. So that's the first main story going on in the episode. The second, and that one relates more to the title, is Uncle Junior begins his reign as the boss. So 2 episodes ago, he got the title of boss, and now he's starting to act on it. The first thing he does is Junior learns that his tailor's grandson died from drugs caused him to kill himself. And it's a really funny scene because Mikey is, insensitive as always. He's telling the story of how the grandson died going over the falls, and his head got bashed in, and he's completely not realizing that this is very upsetting to the old man. But Junior has Mikey kill the drug dealer. Mikey has a funny line actually during that bit, which is he tells the guy, "I'm going to cut you a break. When I toss you over, if you can fly, I won't shoot you down," which is really funny. Just a piece of shit thing to say to the guy. But that rubs the capos the wrong way, because the drug dealer was a big earner for Larry. Another thing Junior does is he sends his guys to this card game, and they break it up and they beat up the guy running it because the guy's not paying anyone. That guy is a friend of Jimmy's. So again, that rubs the capos the wrong way, that Junior's stepping in on their guys and their territory. Junior also taxes Hesh. He does this because Livia suggests it. She wants to get back at Tony for putting her in the home, and Tony has a really great relationship with Hesh. So Livia suggests to Junior that he taxes Hesh. And again, we can see that Livia pretty much has control over Junior. She can manipulate him to do whatever she wants. And this is the first time we're introduced to Johnny Sack. He's not referred to as the underboss of the Lupertazis in this episode. I don't think we'll get mention of the Lupertazis till around season 3. But we're introduced to the New York families through Johnny. Tony goes to Johnny to basically work out a deal for Hesh. He can't reveal to his uncle that he's the one secretly running things. So he has Johnny Sack appear as the mediator in that conflict and get him to lower the tax on Hesh, which is exactly what Tony wants. Then Tony talks to Junior about Augustus. So that's where the title of the episode comes from. The Pax Romana, which means Roman peace, is a time of great peace in the Roman Empire after Augustus became emperor. And Tony is talking to Junior about being a fair leader like Augustus. It's funny, Junior doesn't really understand it. And then Tony has to tell a more vulgar example with a joke. It's about a father bull and a son bull. It actually comes from the movie Colors, I think. But the joke is that don't try to rush to get what you want. Be patient and you'll get a lot more. So he tells this story to Junior. Junior finally gets the lesson, and he decides to use the money he got from Hesh. He gives it to all of the capos to be generous with them. So they all get a little bit of money. Tony returns the money that he got back to Hesh. He's not going to profit off of Hesh's tax. And he talks to Hesh about Junior being boss. He wants Junior to be a good boss, and he says it's because he doesn't want the title. But Hesh can clearly see that Tony is lying, and Tony really does want the title. Not to mention the fact that he is the boss, the secret boss right now, but still. So Tony is definitely interested, but he wants Junior to be the lightning rod in case trouble comes down. Which at the end of the episode we can see is going to happen because the FBI are watching them at their meeting. They're taking pictures. There's a great song playing while all this is happening. We can see that Tony's plan is working because the FBI fully believe that Junior is the boss. They put him at the head of their, you call it a rogues gallery, I think, the pictures of all the mob guys are investigating. But we can see that Junior is going to get into some trouble because the FBI are focusing on him. So yeah, that is the Pax Soprana. We got a lot going on in this episode, and yeah, we're almost done with, or about halfway done with season 1. So yeah, excited, can't wait to keep going, and tune in next time for the next Sopranolog, coming soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. And I'm back with another Sopranolog. Today we're going to be looking at Down Neck, which is the 7th episode of the first season. Now this episode really revolves around the relationship between father and son. So AJ's relationship with Tony, and then Tony's relationship with his own father, Johnny Boy, who we're introduced to in this episode through flashback. So the episode opens with AJ and his friends stealing some sacramental wine from their church. So the school they go to is a religious Catholic school. So they have church, activities going on there. They steal some wine to drink. And there's a really funny line. One of the friends asks if they're going to confess what they've done. And then AJ says that he's going to confess that he stole something, but not what. And it's this real technicality of Catholicism that I've always found really funny. You're supposed to be taking this really seriously, this is your religion and your morality, but there's all these rules and technicalities that people use to skirt around things. We see the same thing later on with Paulie thinking he can get away from hell and demons and stuff by donating money to the church. It's just a very, technical and loophole system that I've always just found really funny about Catholicism. AJ and his friends get caught. One of the friends pukes on one of the teachers. Tony and Carmela get called into the office. The school thinks that AJ might have ADD. This is a pattern of behavior where he's been getting into trouble, and they want to have him tested for ADD. Now, obviously, Tony and Carmela are worried about this. While they're waiting for the test, they also decide to punish AJ. They take away his Nintendo, computer, all that fun stuff. And they also make him go visit Livia in the nursing home. And it's during this visit that AJ reveals that his father goes to see a psychiatrist. Now, Livia learning this information is a very important plot point. This is how Junior is going to find out later, and that's going to be the excuse he gives to why he tries to kill Tony. So it's a very important plot point that this information is now revealed to Livia, who's going to reveal it to Junior later. Now, meanwhile, while this is happening, Tony is wondering, is AJ's behavior connected to his? And does AJ know about the mafia and that Tony's involved in it? It's funny, we see in the scene where the psychiatrist is talking to them that Tony demonstrates a lot of the same symptoms that AJ's demonstrating. His, lack of paying attention, his impulsivity, no regard for the consequences of his actions. So we can definitely see a parallel between Tony and AJ, whether that's genetic or if it's just AJ kind of mirroring his father. But all of this also reminds Tony of his own childhood growing up. And this is the first time we actually get a flashback to 1967. We get to see his father, Johnny Boy, for the first time. We're introduced to him. We've heard about him, but this is the first time we see him actually on screen. We're also introduced to Janice for the first time, and the child actress they have for Janice is incredible. She just has this naturally just like mean, bitchy look to her, which is just perfect for Janice. So great casting on that part. But Tony remembers a couple of incidents from his childhood. The first is he sees his father beating up some guy that owes him money. And this is the first time that Tony ever realized that his dad was not a normal dad, that he was involved in some bad stuff. And then later on, we see an incident where Johnny Boy took Janice to an amusement park without Tony. And Tony feels really hurt by this. He feels left out. So he follows them. And then eventually he finds out that this amusement park is actually a meeting for wise guys. And the dad brought Janice with him as basically cover so he could go meet with his associates and discuss their business. The cops eventually show up and arrest them all. And this is the first time that Tony actually really sees that, oh, shoot, my dad is a criminal. He's involved with all this bad stuff. Oh, one slight little note here. When Tony is running away from these black kids after he throws a candy bar on the floor, one of those kids is actually Michael B. Jordan. So he would go on to become really famous. But this is I think one of his very first appearances on TV. And yeah, so the episode really revolves around that relationship of, father and son, and does the son follow the father? Tony obviously followed his father into the mafia, which he is not super happy about. He recounts this incident where his dad, Johnny Boy, wanted to leave the mafia and go to Reno to go with this guy, Rocco Alatorre. It's actually the guy he beat up at the beginning of the episode, but Livia would not allow him to go. And Tony thinks about, how different his life could have been. His father could have gotten out of the mafia. Tony obviously would not have followed his father, and they could have had a relatively normal life. And he blames Livia for that. He has this great line where he says, if you had been born after the feminists, you would have been the real gangster, which is definitely true. Livia is one of the smartest, most conniving characters on the show. The fact that she was born a woman, just really held her back, because she could have been someone great, because she just has that mind, that scheming, evil mindset to help her get anywhere she wants to be. And she definitely uses that against Tony later this season. So yeah, really good episode. I'm really glad we got a chance to explore AJ and Tony's relationship. We can definitely see the father and son love between the two of them that unfortunately will not always be there. But yeah, definitely great episode. And stay tuned next time for the next Soprano log, coming soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. And I'm back with another Soprano log, Season 1, Episode 8, The Legend of Tennessee Moltisanti, which is a reference to the playwright Tennessee Williams, and we'll get into how the episode relates to him. So the episode opens with Larry's daughter's wedding. They're at this wedding for her, and they hear that the FBI are going to be pursuing indictments against some mobsters. They don't know who yet. They just know that they're going to come down. They decide that they need to go back home and clear their houses of any, illegal stuff. It's funny, actually. Big Pussy, he gave the daughter money for the wedding, and then he has to go into the wedding bag and take it back because he might need the money in case he has to go on the lam. But Tony goes back home, clears his house of illegal stuff, money, guns, all of that. Even Carmela's jewelry is stolen, so they had to get rid of it. And they end up stashing it at Livia's nursing home in her room. They figure that the FBI won't search there. Eventually, the FBI do come to search Tony's house. This is the first time we're introduced to Agent Dwight Harris, who would become a series regular. Love his character. I love his role in the series. And this is the first time we're introduced to him. The FBI are searching through his home. They don't find anything. One of the Italian FBI agents gets into a little confrontation with Tony, and then Tony ends up complaining later about how Italians are treated in America. which is paralleled by what Melfi is going through in this episode. We get to see her home life. We're first introduced to her son, her ex-husband, her family, and particularly her ex-husband really hates Italian stereotypes. He hates how Italians are portrayed in media as gangsters. And in this episode, he tries to convince her to drop Tony as a patient. She initially doesn't want to, but she's considering it because at the end of the episode, when she charges him for a session that he missed, because the FBI were investigating him, he missed that session. He gets really upset. He starts throwing money at her and calling her a call girl, and she starts to see an ugly side to him, the violent side that comes out when he gets news that is not pleasing to him. But also in this episode, Christopher is dealing with depression. He feels that his life is going nowhere. He wants to be this, recognized mobster. He wants to move up in the family, but he feels like his life is going nowhere. Even Brendan Filone is getting more recognition by being dead than he is. He goes through a lot of stuff. He's having nightmares about Emil Kohler, the guy he killed in the first episode. He ends up digging up the body because he thinks he buried it wrong. He gets pissed at this baker who's not serving him and ends up shooting him in the foot for no reason. And this is actually the first time where we see the actor who will play Vito in the second season. He's just a random extra in this scene, but they ended up liking him. They brought him back as to be a regular later on. Yeah, he's also trying to write a screenplay, which is obviously the connection between the title Tennessee William. Adriana calls him that. And Tennessee William actually struggled with depression, just like Christopher in this episode. So Christopher's trying to write a screenplay about the mob. He can't really do it. He's got writer's block. It's not flowing. He ends up feeling just like his life is never going to matter. He's not going to have an arc like the characters in his screenplay. Tony ends up trying to talk to him about depression and what he's going through, but Christopher ends up making fun of people who go through depression, which you can see that Tony is upset by, but he can't really say anything because nobody knows that he's in therapy right now, except for his mother, who found out last episode. And at the end of the episode, she tells Junior that Tony is in therapy. And this is going to be a big problem later on as the conflict between them grows. And we can see a little bit of a spark of the conflict at the beginning when Ray asks Tony what he thinks they should do. And then Junior snaps at him and is like, I'm the boss. Don't ask Tony. I'm the one who gives the orders here. So we can see that conflict brewing in the background. Christopher eventually snaps out of his depression at the end. Funny enough, because he sees his name in the newspaper with a list of mobsters. Which is not good, obviously. You don't want to draw attention to yourself in the mafia. But Christopher is young and he just wants that recognition. He wants to be somebody, and he finally at the end of the episode feels like he's on his way. Pretty good episode overall. I didn't really like the Melfi stuff. I found her family scenes kind of boring. They didn't really go anywhere. I know that they're using it to basically her to start questioning her relationship with Tony. But the husband was a little annoying, and yeah, overall good episode. Not an insane amount of things going on. So stay tuned for the next Soprano log coming soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. I'm back with another Soprano log. Season 1, Episode 9, Boca. Now things are starting to heat up for this season. There's two main beats going on in this episode. The first is with Meadow's soccer team. The team is being coached by this man, Doug Hauser. He's a really great coach. He's taking them, all the way to the championships. And the fathers could not be more happy about this. They like that their daughters are achieving something, and they're being involved in sports. They're very grateful to the coach. They like him a lot. However, they learn that he is planning on leaving the school and then going to work at a university. So in mob fashion, they try intimidating him, getting him to stay. They offer him gifts. They do some things that are basically like a threat to him to not leave and to continue to coach their daughters. However, when one of the soccer players tries to commit suicide, they learn that the coach has actually been sleeping with this player. He's been molesting her. Tony decides that he is going to have him killed. Now, Arthur goes along with this. He really hates the coach after he learns about this. But after talking with Charmaine, he realizes that it would be wrong for them to kill this guy, and they should leave it to the cops. He tells Tony this. Tony gets really angry. He doesn't want to hear that. He kicks Artie out of the Bing. But after thinking about it for a while and drinking, he decides to basically call the cops and let them handle it. He doesn't kill the guy. So that's the first main beat that's happening in this episode. But the more important thing for the plot is the second beat, which is, Junior and Mikey are working out of their lawyer's office. It's a place where the feds can't bug because of the legal protection. Mikey is really suspicious of Tony. He's having Tony followed. He's trying to see where he's up to because he thinks that Tony might be a rat. They keep losing Tony the trail. So they know that he's going somewhere secret. They don't know where yet. There's actually a really funny scene in the bathroom where Mikey's talking to Junior, and Junior just took a piss, and then he touches Mikey on the face without washing his hands. Junior's not the most caring person in the world. But Junior decides that he has enough of these headaches. He's going to go down to Boca in Florida with his longtime girlfriend, Bobby. She works for the union for him. They steal money from the union, and they're really in love. They really like each other, these two. So they go down to Florida, and there we learn that Junior eats her out. He performs oral sex on her, which is very taboo among Italians. The reason why is they consider it like an effeminate thing, like a demeaning thing for men to go down on women. And that's something I've heard about the Romans as well, so it might go back all the way that far. But basically, it's not something he wants to get out. So he tells her, don't tell anyone this, or else I'll be really embarrassed and lose face. She kind of lets it slip to one of her friends, and then the friend ends up letting it slip all the way to Carmela. So Carmela hears about this, and then she tells Tony later on that Junior does this. At first, Tony, doesn't really care too much, but when they're playing golf, Junior insults Tony's sportsmanship ability, which we know is a thing that Tony really hates. He mentioned that in the pilot, and of course the most famous line from the series about the varsity athlete. That really gets under Tony's skin. So basically he starts hinting that Uncle June does this. He's like, are you eating sushi, Uncle June? And he's singing that song, south of the border, just letting him know that he knows that Uncle June does this. This pisses off Uncle Junior, and he hints to Tony that he knows about psychiatry. So they both know something really taboo about the other. Junior tells Mikey that Tony goes to a psychiatrist, and they debate having him killed over this. Both because he could be revealing information to the psychiatrist that could lead to arrests, but also just because Junior's really pissed at Tony for making fun of him like that. He gets really, though, angry at the girlfriend. He storms down to the union. They're supposed to have dinner, but Junior angrily is about to hit her, but decides at the very end not to hit her, and instead smashes a cream pie into her face. That's actually a reference to The Public Enemy, which, if you have not seen the movie, you're lucky because I already did a review on it. So check that out. I'll link it in the description. But yeah, it's a reference to the scene when Cagney shoves the grapefruit into his girlfriend's face, which is a really iconic scene. And David Chase has talked about how influential The Public Enemy was to him. There's a lot of references to it in the series. Yeah, so that's what that's referencing. Junior breaks up with her, fires her from the union. But as he's leaving, we can see that he's a little bit sad about that. He really liked this girl, but his pride, that's more important to him. His face within the mob is more important to him than this woman he loves. So he chooses to just let her go. So yeah, that is the episode Boca. The title Boca actually is a reference to not only Florida, where Junior takes her, but it's also Spanish and Italian for mouth, which of course the oral aspect is featured prominently in this episode. And yeah, the seeds of the Junior Tony fight are really starting to sprout, and we can see where this is going to lead to. So yeah, stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to check that out. Thanks. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here, and I'm back with another Sopranolog. Season 1, Episode 10, A Hit is a Hit, which is a play on words on a mafia hit, and of course a popular song on the radio, which is featured heavily in this episode. So the episode opens with the guys pull this heist on these Colombian drug dealers. They steal a lot of money from them. I've noticed that this is the first time that they've ripped off Colombians, but they'll rip off Colombians again and get a lot of money in the season 6 episode Mayhem, when Paulie steals money from the Colombians. So they get a bunch of money from these guys. They're flush, and Christopher and Adriana go out to celebrate. They go see a show, and afterwards they run into this rapper named Massive Genius, who invites them to come over to his mansion. He's, really into mafia stuff, so he wants to talk to Christopher, and he wants Christopher to arrange a meeting with Hesh. Now, the reason for that is because Hesh was the producer for this black artist back in the day, but Massive Genius feels that the royalties from the song were not distributed fairly. It mostly went to Hesh, and he wants that money in the form of reparations to go to the guy's mother, who is his aunt. So Christopher arranges a sit down, and because of that, he now has a connection to Massive Genius, and he uses that to get Adriana involved as a music producer. She knows this band. She used to date the lead singer, and they're going to, kind of fund this band and try to make a little money that way, using Massive Genius's support. Christopher leaves it to Adriana to kind of run the thing. She wants to be empowered and start doing stuff. But he kind of takes over when the band starts disappointing them. The recording session's not going well. It's wasting Christopher's money. And he ends up hitting the guy with a guitar. And so, Christopher pretty much takes over. That makes Adriana really mad. Chris shows the demo tape to Hesh, who's obviously a big-time music producer. And Hesh doesn't like it. He says that they don't have charisma or any of the other stuff that his previous artists had. He mentions that he met Jimi Hendrix really early on in his career, so he might have been involved with Hendrix. But basically says this band sucks. And then Christopher realizes that Massive Genius is only supporting them because he wants to bang Adriana. And when Chris tells Adriana this, she gets pissed and storms off. In terms of the reparations, Hesh debates, internally, whether or not to give it. But at the end, he decides to not pay it. And when Massive threatens to sue Hesh countersues him because Massive used a sample of a song that Hesh owns the copyright to. So it ends in kind of a legal battle. Kind of a weird little subplot, to be honest. It's never brought up again, but that is what's happening in this episode. And the other thing that's happening is Tony is trying to spark a friendship with Doc Cusamano, his next door neighbor. He buys Cusamano these Cuban cigars as a thank you for recommending Melfi, because he really likes how the therapy is going. Cusamano invites Tony to hang out with his rich white friends, barbecue together and talk. It becomes clear, though, that they're really only interested in Tony because he's in the mob and they're fascinated with him. It's really cringe, to be honest. They're obsessing and talking about things like they're involved and they know what they're doing. I describe them kind of like mafia weebs. They're just fanboys and total lack of self-awareness that this is inappropriate to talk to Tony about. But Tony wants to join them at the golf club that they're a part of, but Cusamano tells him that the books are closed. Funny, it's kind of a parallel between the books being closed on becoming a made man, and Tony's excluded in this time. So Tony realizes that he's being used. He tells this story about this guy who him and his friends used to make fun of and only bring around to laugh at, and then Tony feels that way with Cusamano. He feels like a dancing bear used for other people's entertainment, which is not a good feeling. He decides to get back at Cusamano by he gets this package filled with sand, and he gives it to Cusamano and asks him to hold on to it for him. And Cusamano obviously thinks, what anyone would think, that this is drugs or a weapon, and they're freaking out. They don't know what's going on. And then Tony's just doing it to have a laugh to get back at Cusamano for using him like that. But yeah, a weird kind of episode. I gotta say, the Massive Genius plot felt kind of out of nowhere. It didn't really tie that well into what's happening. And yeah, it's just an interesting episode, but not one of the more memorable ones. But we're gearing up here to get into some of the really intense stuff in this season. So stay tuned for the next Soprano log where we're going to explore that. Thanks. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here, and I'm back with another Soprano log. This time, Season 1, Episode 11, Nobody Knows Anything. Now, this is when things really start to get cooking, so let's get into it. The episode opens with the guys at a bordello, a whorehouse. They're there having sex with some girls when Pussy throws out his back. There's a really funny scene where they have a doctor come in, and the doctor is dressed up in this, maid uniform. He was clearly having some kind of fetish sex with some of the workers, but just a really, really funny image right there. The next day, Pussy is busted at Jimmy's club. They find guns there, and Pussy tries to run when the FBI show up, but obviously, he's a fat fuck. He gets caught, but he's released from jail pretty quickly, which Makazian tells Tony is because Pussy has turned informant. He lists a bunch of reasons why. One of his FBI acquaintances told him that Pussy is an informant, which Tony really doesn't want to believe. Like, Pussy is one of his closest friends. He doesn't want to believe that he has betrayed the family like that. But there is a lot of evidence for it. Pussy begins acting really strangely. He's constantly complaining about his back. He's not collecting payments. Tony talks to Melfi about this, and Melfi suggests that Pussy might be dealing with guilt. The back pain might be a psychological response to feeling guilt about something. And then Tony really starts to consider that Pussy might have turned rat. So he tells Paulie to investigate. He wants him to be absolutely sure and see the wire before they make any move against Pussy. So Paulie takes him to a sauna and wants to get him naked so that he can see if he's wearing a wire or not. And obviously Pussy does not take off his clothes. He says it's because the heat of the sauna is bad for him, but we're left to wonder, does he have a wire on? Why does he not want to get naked? And he's acting very suspicious. Tony discovers, however, that Vin is into Pussy for a lot of money, like $30,000, which might be a reason for him to want Pussy gone. He might be lying to get rid of him so that the debt disappears. But before he can confirm with Makazian, the bordello is raided and Vin is caught there. He's suspended from the force, obviously, because he's, doing something illegal. And then he commits suicide by jumping off the bridge. This is the last straw. He's got nothing going on in his life, and he decides to just kill himself. This leaves Tony in a bad spot. He doesn't know now whether he was telling the truth or not. But when Jimmy is released from prison, he goes over to Tony's house and starts asking him specific questions about, their crime. And it's very clear that he is an informant now. He's even circling around Tony like a snake. He's trying to get information. He's clearly wearing a wire. So Tony realizes that Jimmy is the rat, but nobody knows where Pussy is. Pussy has disappeared. He obviously got scared and ran away. So nobody knows what's up with him. At the end of the episode, though, Tony sells Livia's house. She's very upset by this. So she tells Junior about the meetings Tony's been having in the old folks' home with the other capos. And Junior assumes that this is a move against him. He assumes that Tony is plotting to take over. And he decides that he has to kill Tony before this happens. Which is exactly what Livia wanted. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's very manipulative. And she wanted to have Tony killed for treating her this way. Which obviously Mikey's very happy about. He's telling his wife all these things. It's funny, actually. He's complaining about Tony breaking the rules by talking to Shrink. But meanwhile, he's telling mob stuff to his wife, which is just as, against the rules. So they're all hypocrites. A couple of things I noted in this episode. There's a really weird title where it says 4 days later when it cuts to Pussy getting arrested at Jimmy's club. I don't recall another instance of them, doing like a 4 days later kind of title card like that. There's a lot of weird editing in this first season, as I've mentioned before, but I've just noticed that. Another thing I noticed was when Pussy is leaving the meeting and Paulie goes to talk to him, you can see on a door nearby it says American Club members only. So obviously that connects to members only, the jacket, and the theory behind who might have killed Tony in the last episode. Not sure if it has anything to do with any of that, but I just noticed the members only thing. It's definitely intentional. It might just be a reference to being a member of the mafia, but that detail is there on purpose. Another thing I noticed was Tony mentions offhandedly that if he was in Makazian's position, he wouldn't bet football. And later on in season 6, when he's doing his gambling and he's really deep into it, he's betting football. So it's funny to see that he's fallen that low, that he's become a degenerate gambler, just like he mocked Makazian for being. And speaking of Makazian, we get a lot of great development with his character here. We see that he really wants to be Tony's friend. He likes Tony. The bordello mistress, who he was close with, tells Tony that Vin really, really trusted Tony and looked to him like a friend. So Tony feels a little bit guilty about the way he treated him all these years. And we can see in season 5 in the test stream, he dreams that Finn's father, who he's having dinner with, is Makazian. He plants his face on the dad. So we can tell that Makazian meant something to Tony too. And that's why he's still hanging around in Tony's thoughts. But yeah, that's the episode. Things are really starting to get cooking here at the end of the season. The hit is going to be set up soon against Tony, and can't wait to explore that episode next. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. We're back with another Soprano log. We're almost done with season 1. This is the second to last episode, episode 12, Isabella. Now, this episode opens with Tony very depressed. He's worried about what happened to Pussy. Pussy's disappeared. He's on a lot of lithium and Prozac, but nothing is working. He's just lying in bed all day, not taking care of himself. Christopher's really worried about what he might do. Tony sees a girl next door at the Cusamano's place. Her name is Isabella. She's a beautiful foreign exchange student studying dentistry. Tony introduces himself to her. They go out to lunch. They talk. Tony has this vision of her in an old Italian house from like the 1900s. She's nursing a baby named Antonio, and it's this really weird vision he has out of nowhere. Later, he realizes that the whole thing has just been a hallucination. There is no Isabella. She never existed. When he talks to Cusamano about it, Cusamano has no idea what he's talking about. And then Melfi talks to him about the fact that Isabella symbolizes a loving, nurturing mother like Tony never had. And obviously, Tony in this case is the baby. Is named Antonio. So we have that going on. Meanwhile, Mikey has arranged the hit on Tony. It's moving forward. They've hired 2 black guys to take him out so that it won't lead back to Junior. There's a very funny scene at the funeral where they're talking about this. They're at this funeral for this old lady that Junior knows. He talks about the fact that this woman gave him his first hand job behind the chicken mart with another kid. It's this incredibly funny scene, so inappropriate, but Junior is kind of freaking out about killing Tony. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to think about it. He feels like he has to kill Tony because of the capos meeting behind his back, but he doesn't want to do it because I think deep down Junior really does love Tony, thinks of him like a son, and that's why he's having Mikey take care of all the details. So the two guys follow Tony when he's going to therapy. They're getting ready to take him out, but Christopher pulls up and blocks them in. Christopher is following Tony because he's worried about Tony's mental health and wants to see what he's up to. So they're not able to kill Tony that day. The next day, when he's at the newsstand buying orange juice, they do the hit on him. And of course, orange juice makes us think of Godfather, where oranges represent death. Vito Corleone is shot when he's buying oranges. So this is an obvious reference to Godfather. But they try to kill Tony. They're very bad at it, to be honest. It's kind of ridiculous. They stick the gun into his car, and then Tony can grab the gun and stop them from shooting him. But Tony ends up killing one of the guys, and the other guy escapes. And then Tony gets away. At the hospital, the FBI come and talk to him and tell him that this wasn't a carjacking like he thinks. This was an assassination attempt. And they offer him immunity if he testifies. Tony obviously refuses. He doesn't want to betray his oath. Livia and Junior are freaking out by this setback. They're worried that Tony will realize they're behind it and make a counter move. So they decide to go visit Tony at his house to avoid suspicion. And while they're there, Livia pretends to forget who Meadow is. She's pretending like she's got dementia, trying to seem more sympathetic, trying to seem more weak so that Tony won't suspect her as having a part in all this. And of course, this is the first time I think we're introduced to Gabagool, one of the classic Sopranos memes. But this is one of the first times where they're eating it on screen. Tony, at the end of the episode, vows to find out, who's behind this hit, but the assassination attempt has kind of snapped him out of his depression. He realized he wanted to live, and now he's going to do whatever it takes to, avoid being killed. So that's what happened in this episode. Really great episode, a lot going on here. And yeah, we're setting up the conflict for the final episode. So stay tuned next for that, coming up soon. What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. And we are finally at the season 1 finale, I Dream of Jeanie Cusamano. Real quick, before we get into the episode, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for supporting the channel. It seems like people are really liking these episode recaps, and reading all your wonderful comments has just made all the work worth it for me. So just want to take a moment to thank you all for that. It's awesome that we get a chance to interact this way and discuss one of our favorite shows of all time. And it's all leading up to the movie in September, and I feel incredibly lucky to just have this platform and to be able to share my love of the show with all of you. So thank all of you guys for watching. I have a couple of quick announcements. The first is that I've started a Twitter. Basically, the purpose of this is just to post when I release a new video. Sometimes YouTube can be a little bit finicky about notifying subscribers. So if you ever want to check if a new video is out, you can always check my Twitter. If I ever get banned or something from the platform, I'll announce it there as well. So any news that YouTube might mess with, I'll post it on that Twitter account. So feel free to check that out. The link is in the description of every video. The other thing I wanted to say is that I've started a Teespring store. If anyone wants to support the channel, I've got shirts, hoodies, and some other cool things on there. You can get one with my channel name on it, as well as my alma mater, Slip and Fall State. Right now, that's all I have on there, but if anyone has any cool non-copyright ideas, I'd be happy to put them on there as well. I ordered a sample for myself, and I'll say that the material is really soft. It's really nice. Again, it's just if you want to support the channel. But regardless, videos will still be coming out as usual. The link for that will be in the description as well. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the season 1 finale. This is I Dream of Jeanie Cusamano. The episode opens with a meeting at Satriali's. They're discussing something, but the overall point is just to confirm that Jimmy is indeed a rat. And they all confirm this, and Junior gives the okay to have him killed. So Christopher takes Jimmy to go meet some Russian girls. That's how they lure him into the room, where Silvio pops out behind him, puts a gun to his head. There's been a lot of discussion whether Jimmy was actually the rat or not. We definitely find out Pussy is a rat in season 2, but I think from the way that he's saying, like, Oh God, oh God. It's kind of an indication that he realized that he was caught. I do believe that Jimmy was a rat. We actually find out that all the capos rat eventually. Ray is a rat, even though he's never found out. He dies before anyone finds out. Jimmy was a rat. Larry rats in season 6. He tells them about the bookie, Willie Overall, that Tony killed. He doesn't say it was Tony. He lies and says it was Jackie Aprile. That's how he kind of makes a deal with the government while not getting anyone in trouble. It is still technically ratting. He is talking to the police and giving them information. But it's funny, all the capos, except for Tony, turn out to be rats. But they kill him. They stuff a rat into his mouth as a message, and they leave him for dead. Livia shows up at Tony's house, acting all senile. She's calling for her sister, who's dead. She doesn't recognize Meadow or AJ. She's just putting on this act that she's going through Alzheimer's. Tony brings this up to Melfi, and Melfi's able to realize that, based on everything that's going on, it was most likely Livia who told Junior about the therapy, and Livia is actually the one behind the assassination attempt on him. Now, Tony completely rages out at this. He doesn't want to face the fact that his mother wants him dead, even though his subconscious is kind of screaming that at him. Carmela and Rosalie are having lunch at Artie's new restaurant. The insurance money came in, and they're eating together. Father Phil shows up, and Carmela notices that Rosalie has given Father Phil one of Jackie Aprile's old watches. So this is the first hint she gets that her relationship with Father Phil is not as exclusive as she thought, that he's actually has a connection with these other women, these other mob wives, as well as her. The FBI bring Tony in to this little hideout they have. They want to get him to testify. He refuses, but they play him this audio tape that they recorded at Green Grove, confirming that Livia was, in fact, behind the hit. She was talking to Junior and revealing information about Tony. And then Tony has to face the fact that, yes, his mother was behind it all. Artie visits Livia in the hospital. He brings her some food. Again, she's acting senile, putting on this act to appear weak. And she tells Artie that Tony was the one who burnt down his restaurant. Again, she's great at giving out information that she knows will lead to actions against Tony. And in this case, I do believe that she was, again, trying to manipulate someone to go kill him. So she's just an incredibly evil woman, but brilliant. Tony decides that he needs to weaken Junior. He's not ready to kill Junior yet, but he's worried that Junior might attack him. So he kills one of Junior's men, Chucky, to prevent him from being used as an assassin against him. He also goes back to Melfi and tells her that, she was right. He apologizes for raging out on her, and he also warns her that she needs to leave town. He's worried that Junior might come after her because they think that the shrink might testify based on what Tony told her. She's very upset by this, but she agrees to, leave town for her own safety. Later on, when Tony is alone in a parking lot, Artie shows up and pulls a gun on him. Tony, lies to him, tells him that he wasn't responsible for the restaurant fire. He totally was. It's funny, he's swearing on his mother's life, but that means nothing to him anymore. Cute little detail there. But Artie is talked down, and he doesn't shoot Tony. And we can see just how much Tony loves Artie. Like, Artie pulled a gun on him, and there's never any reprisal whatsoever. Tony would never hurt Artie. He would kill, his own family members later on for lesser transgressions than that. But he just loves Artie so much. Artie is really his best friend. Junior and Livia go to have dinner at Tony's house. Again, keeping up appearances, but everyone is aware of what's going on. In fact, Tony has talked to Carmela earlier about that he knows his mother and Junior are behind this. I've said this before, but it's an interesting detail that he's much more open with Carmela in this first season about mob life. He would never talk to her about these details in later seasons, but I think they were still figuring out the balance there. Artie debates, going to the police about the fire, but if he does, he'll have to give back the insurance money, and it will probably ruin the restaurant. And he decides to not do that. Charmaine is really happy with what's going on. He decides to just keep it to himself and forgive Tony. Tony comes clean to the guys about the therapy. So he admits to them that he's been going to a therapist. The information's out there. Junior's using it against them, and he wants to clear it with the guys. They're mostly accepting of it. Christopher kind of storms out, but for the most part, it's not that big of a deal to them. Even Paulie was seeing a psychiatrist before. Carmela goes to the church, and she sees Father Phil and Rosalie, being really close and intimate. And again, this confirms with her that her relationship is not what she thinks it is with Father Phil. She throws away this food that she was bringing to him. Chris and Paulie go to kill Mikey when he's out jogging. Chris wants revenge for the Brendan Falone hit. It's really funny. Paulie's running, and he trips into some poison ivy. He's a bumbling idiot, but they kill him, and so Junior's top men are taken out now. But before they can make a move against Junior, indictments come down, and him, Larry, and some other known mobsters are arrested, which kind of saves Junior because now he's out of Tony's reach in prison. There's a funny scene during the newsreel where they're interviewing Mikey's wife, and she's saying that the last thing he said to her was, I love you, when in reality what we saw was he was, calling her a hoe and saying, bitch, take a Midol, which is funny that she's just lying to those cameras. The FBI want Junior to testify against Tony. They want him to admit that Tony was the real boss and not him. But Junior refuses to do this. He chooses to hold on to his pride, and he can't, bring himself to face the fact that he's just been a fool this whole time. He would rather go to prison with his honor and with his pride than rat and turn informant. Carmela confronts Father Phil later at home. She tells him that she thinks that he gets off on this manipulative game he plays on women, where there's some flirting and some sexual tension, but it never goes anywhere. And he uses them to also get things like food and using their houses and movie theaters and things like that. So she kind of confronts him. She still likes him a lot, but she sets him straight, and it's a great scene because it's absolutely true. He's a manipulative guy. Tony goes to confront his mother, but before he can do so, she's had a stroke. And he gets into a little confrontation with her as they're wheeling her away. But he's fully realized now what an evil person she is. But he's denied his vengeance against Junior and Livia. He doesn't get satisfaction in either of those cases. Tony and his family are driving when a storm hits. They can't really drive on the road, so they go to Vesuvio. The power is out, but they let him in. And it's the final kind of scene as they're seeking refuge from the storm. They're having this nice family dinner by candlelight. And Tony makes a toast where he says, if you're lucky at the end, you'll remember the good times. And we get a callback to this, a great callback in the final episode. Again, when they're at a diner, AJ mentions this incident. He says that, remember that time you said remember the good times? And then Tony can't remember it. It just shows how far he's fallen from season 1 to season 6. Like the season 1 ending is this nice family moment. It's very peaceful, but we can see that it's all going to go downhill later on. So yeah, that was the first season of The Sopranos. Like I said, it's been great reviewing it with you guys. I haven't seen the whole thing straight through in a while, so I'm noticing things that I didn't notice before. An absolutely incredible show. And I cannot wait to get started because I know it only gets better from here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for more episodes coming very soon.